This game is unbearable.
Open Season is a movie, I guess? I don't really have a fat lot to say about it. Sure, it's enjoyable enough, it's amusing, and it's got some good characters, decent animation, and voice acting, but there's little else to it. Don't get me wrong, you could find far worse to watch, but it's not what I'd call essential viewing. It's just a decent movie, and one that certainly did not justify 3 sequels. That's right, 3! That's what I call flogging a dead, deer. This month's review is a little different, however. To tackle this game, I'm teaming up with TheFrozenCavern.
What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and today I'll be helping out Michael here with reviewing the open season video game.
As with most other movie tie-ins, I didn't really have high hopes for this one, but is it the stinker I expected? The game begins with,
Boog, have you seen Dinkelman?
What in the name of all that is holy?
Well, this is horrifying. I mean, what is this? This wasn't in the movie. The only objective here is to touch Dinkelman, which, forgive my dirty mind, sounds like a euphemism for something.
Go on, touch Dinkelman. You know you want to.
Boog can run on his hind legs to catch him, and then,
Alright then. That's that, I guess.
once this surrealism is over, it turns out it was all a dream. I mean, thank goodness, right? Once Boog wakes up, we get to control the camera from Boog's perspective, which is actually kind of innovative.
This game's cutscenes are all done in first person, and during them you're able to move the camera around a bit to see your surroundings. It's a very interesting idea for doing cutscenes since that's not at all the standard for license-based games. Even first-person shooter license-based games don't do this very often, and the appeal is pretty strong for the first 15 minutes. We'll go more in detail as to why it suffers throughout the video.
Instead of a standard yes or no response, we're prompted to push the analog stick up and down to gesture a nod, or side to side to shake Boog's head.
Do you have Dinkelman with you? Nod like this for yes.
Follow the instructions on the screen to say yes or to say no.
Yeah, this owl also appears throughout the game, providing you with hints whether or not it's absolutely necessary. I mean, I get that a younger audience is their target demographic, but did I really need to be told how to nod my head? I think I can figure it out. It's almost as bad as being told how to jump.
You know, I never really understood why so many games do that. It's usually like 1 of 4 buttons. It's pretty easy to figure out.
Anyway, the first objective is to find Dinkelman before returning to Ranger Beth. Then we need to ride in the back of Beth's pickup truck, leaning left and right to pick up Ranger badges.
Is that what I think it is?
By the way, these badges that you collect ends up giving some kind of nature fact. A lot of them are harmless stuff, and there's actually a little bit of information that you probably don't even know. Though there are a few that are kind of passive-aggressive towards people, mainly having to do with trash. It does suck that that kind of stuff is still just as much of a problem today, if not worse, honestly. Also, there are different categories for the badges you get, and completing one of these categories gives a special movie, which feels like it was made with a mix of PowerPoint and Windows Movie Maker. These transitions look really unprofessional to me. It looks like someone in middle school edited this. They're also mostly filled with images from the movie, and it doesn't feel worth it to get these movies at all.
Well, that was pointless.
Eventually, we park next to Shaw's truck, where it becomes apparent he's killed a deer before open season.
Oh, that guy really chaps my khakis.
You've catch your what now?
Beth heads inside, and it turns out the deer is alive!
Listen, you gotta help me. Can you untie me?
Good thing too, or we wouldn't have much of a game.
The main gimmick with the cutscenes is that you are to look in particular directions from time to time, and whenever a character asks a yes or no question, you shake your head yes or no to answer them. This interactivity was kinda cool starting out, but it quickly loses its flavor since looking around isn't done very often since most of the game's cutscenes move the camera automatically anyways, and when it comes to answering questions, that's incredibly far apart too, and there's never a reason to say no, so why even bother giving us the ability to answer in the first place?
Yeah, I get what you mean here. What started out as a pretty innovative concept turns out to be fairly redundant. Also, have you noticed there's very little music in this game?
Boring.
The gameplay isn't too bad for the most part, besides leaning a little too much on the easy side, but the lack of music just serves to make the game feel even more unbearable.
Know any more bear puns?
Ooh, I've got some, but don't get grisly once I've said it.
Ugh.
Oh, I've done a whole video filled with bee puns. Do not tempt me to make puns.
Of course, Shaw sees you free his deer and vows revenge.
I'm gonna get you someday. Understand?
You know it's just a bear, right? Later, Elliot appears at your garage and coaxes you into town with a chocolate woohoo bar.
There's this place in town that has stacks of them.
The pair head to the store, where we then need to find a way inside, making sure nobody sees us.
Jeez Louise, a bear.
Why are we even bothering with stealth if that's their reaction?
Once inside, we need to find and eat 10 woohoo bars before the time runs out.
Oh, good.
Naturally, we're caught, because I'm a bear, obviously, and we wake up in the wild. This is where the game becomes a little more interesting.
Just a little. Don't get your hopes up, guys.
The player mostly controls Boog throughout, but in order to access out-of-reach badges, you can throw Elliot. Yes, you heard that right. You can indeed throw your friend.
Oh, that's smart.
That's what friends are for.
And maybe I'm just horribly sadistic, but throwing my friend around is oddly satisfying. Never gets old. Boog can also call Elliot to return him to you, although sometimes he'll get stuck and the best option is to just carry him yourself. Come on, you useless prick. Do I have to do everything around here myself? And not only can you throw a deer around, you can also throw rabbits, because why the hell not? Honestly, these games have a unique way of showing kids how to make friends.
I've tried hitting people and even throwing the smaller ones. I'm just so lonely.
A little further along, and our way is blocked by this angry squirrel.
Oi! Where do you think you're going? You cannot pass through this area. This is McSquizzy's turf.
Naturally, since he's angry, he's depicted as Scottish.
Nothing like casual racism.
You used me!
And naturally, since he's Scottish, in the movie, he's played by Billy Connolly, the quintessential Scotsman.
Touch a needle in this tree and I'll give you such a do it.
Need someone to play a gruff Scottish father? Why not Billy Connolly? Equally gruff Scottish settler? Billy Connolly. Narrator for a short film based in Scotland? Billy Connolly. Obese chicken lady in waiting? Billy Connolly. Okay, I made that last part up, but the point is, he's a prolific actor with a very distinctive voice. Who, I wonder, would play him in the game?
It is easy being green.
Indeed, here is voiced by the same guy who provided the voice for the titular Shrek in his video games. How about that?
It's a small world after all.
Squirrels ready!
McSquizzy and the squirrels bombard the pair with nuts. Seriously, who knew squirrels were such a menace? They refuse to let you pass, so Elliot offers some help.
I can always try to, I don't know, talk to them or something.
Some of the animals in the forest don't like you yet.
Well, I do keep throwing some of them, to be fair. It's hard to blame them.
Who put that there?
Throwing Elliot at the squirrel trees temporarily distracts the squirrels so you can pass. And finally, we get some music. Hallelujah! Yeah, bagpipes. In case you couldn't tell, he was meant to be Scottish.
Do you know what? I think I can tolerate the silence after all.
The squirrels then bombard us with so many nuts we fall over the cliff.
Ouch!
Boog lands on a porcupine. Now we have to wiggle our butts to shake it off. Yes, this is actually a part of the game. There's even an entire minigame devoted to this activity. I'm not even kidding. So anyway, in this next part, we come across some skunks who simply don't like us. I mean, we've tortured rabbits, invaded the home of some squirrels, and we regularly throw a deer around.
My pancreas.
It's kind of understandable for them to be exercising caution, isn't it?
I'm developing quite the reputation, and I've barely been here 5 minutes.
Eventually, we come across 2 Spanish skunks who have lost their babies.
I don't have eyes on the back of my butt. How am I supposed to dig out a hiding place for open season and watch the babies at the same time?
Indeed, one is voiced by the great Billy West, meaning he essentially sounds like Fry, but Spanish.
Guess that makes him a Spanish fry.
Boog then has the bright idea of finding the skunk's babies so they can pass.
Yeah, let's go find their kids.
Boog. Oh, go away! I don't give a hoot! So we then have your average find the item task, in which we have to find 5 kits and throw them vaguely in the direction of the 2 skunks.
Bonus points if one of them gets concussion.
Return to the skunks and they now complain they haven't got any food, so we then have to find them 5 grubs. Honestly, why are 90% of NPCs so bloody ungrateful? For this you need to use the smell ability with the L1 button to sniff out the grubs. This is a lot like the sniff move in Ice Age 2, and it can also be used to sniff out health bushes to refill your energy.
What was I thinking? I should have married a bear.
Once this task is finished with, the skunks are now our buddies too, which means we can now throw them as a means of attack. That was nice of them.
Les continuons! Les quitter, quelle terrible odeur!
Ah!
It's her.
We then come across Giselle, Elliot's love interest, who has absolutely nothing to do with the plot. Here we need to find some flowers for her, making sure not to alert the hunter in the lodge. I've already lost count of all the item collection tasks we've had to perform. Thankfully, we then switch to Elliot as we take part in the big race against Patrick Warburton deer as we vie for Giselle's affections. Or something. I actually forget why we're doing this, to be honest.
Oh, please, you're a horn short. Half doe, half buck.
You're a duck!
Yeah, it's essentially Kronk, but in deer form. Wait, a big race with Kronk? This sounds familiar. Anyway, finally we have a level that's mildly exciting, and with music!
Praise the Lord!
Elliot is light on his feet and can jump, which immediately makes him a lot more interesting to control than Boog. Why couldn't I made the whole game about him? Once the race is finished, Elliot is rewarded with, a kick.
I dread to think what the booby prize was for losing.
By the way, can I just point out how violently characters fly whenever they launch from somewhere? Like, seriously, it almost feels like Smash Ultimate took some notes from this game with how fast they go.
I tell you what, Bear, you do me a favour, and I'll stop knocking you about the noodle with my nuts!
Yeah, don't do that.
You have such a way with words.
The objective here is to scare the loggers away from the squirrels' trees. We can do this by roaring at them, which is a technique you employ throughout the game with the enemy hunters you encounter. When you approach a hunter, you have to hold down the X button, and then release it to perform a roar. Releasing X when the on-screen bar reaches the red zone makes Boog perform a really powerful roar that frightens them away. Now, these hunters may sound formidable, but they are in fact really stupid. You can sneak up to them until the clock runs out, at which moment you need to hold R1 to disguise yourself as a tree to trick them. Yes, you heard me. A tree.
I guess you could say that disguise is barely passable. Why does nobody ever like my jokes?
Sometimes I might even see you approaching, and you can still fool them into thinking you're a tree.
Is someone there?
Is this actually happening? This is some of the worst stealth I've experienced. It's just not stealthy. The thing is, Ralph Wolf disguises himself as a bush to hide from Sam Sheepdog, but this works because of its cartoonish aesthetic. Sure, this is based on an animated movie, but juxtaposing the realistic, luscious backdrops and surprisingly good graphics with these cartoonish stealth mechanisms just comes off as ridiculous. And it's just too damn easy. And besides, fleeing into the forest and dropping your weapon is probably the least logical thing to do when approached by a grizzly bear. I mean, come on! After scaring off the loggers, the squirrels become your buddies.
Right through that cave is a shortcut out of here. Listen, lad, if you ever need help, McSquizzy's clan will be there by your side, ready to whip some okay.
In case you'd forgotten, is meant to be Scottish.
Once we enter the mine shaft, this loading screen does not fill me with confidence. Oh, and what a shock, we're in a minecart. What is this now, the third time?
You wouldn't think this would be such a common thing, would you?
The idea is to ride the cart and steer left or right when you come to a set of points to avoid crashing.
Something that happens in this game, not too often thankfully, is whenever a level is too dark. The rest of the game, though having a rather bland color palette a lot of the time, with most of it being some form of brown, it's still bright enough to see. Here, good luck seeing all the turns and jumps you have to make because they're practically invisible as you go in and out of complete darkness. This game honestly isn't that hard, but making it through here without crashing proved to be a lot harder than it should have been, just because the default settings don't help you see in dark areas. Luckily, this segment is a little forgiving when it comes to failure, so even with it being a hassle, you can get through it in a matter of minutes.
Super Alex!
After removing another porcupine from our butts, we need to find and cross a beaver dam. First, we need to make our way through this valley full of hunters. Fortunately for us, not one of them suspects you might not be a tree. I'm just that convincing. At this stage of the game, the squirrels are also prepared to help. Simply throw Elliot at a squirrel tree to get the squirrel to come out, and then throw the squirrel at a tree near the hunter, and it will then use that tree to knock them on the noodle with their nuts.
I'm learning the lingo. I'm practically fluent.
What this does is cause a distraction, meaning the red part of the raw meter becomes much larger, making the hunters easier to scare, as if they weren't easy enough to scare already. You can also grab a squirrel and place it on a hunter's head, because why not? And it will stun the other hunters in the vicinity. These are all pretty inventive ideas, but with all these methods of attack and very little chance of getting caught, it just makes the game altogether too easy. And it's also kind of pointless considering it's just as easy to take them out yourself, as getting shot only sees you receive some minor damage. This bear is like a friggin' tank! Oh, and by the way, completing tasks and finding the aforementioned badges gains you points that you can spend on power-ups, including more powerful roars and health boosts, which is kinda neat, I guess, but it doesn't have that much of an impact on the gameplay at all.
Honestly, some of them aren't really needed because of how easy this game is, but a few of the upgrades are somewhat useful, like increased range for throwing things and throwing Elliot as stun hunters to scare them. Now, those upgrades are few and far between and situational in-game, but I've seen worse uses for upgrades before.
That's Shaw. Shaw! Wait, Shaw's a little squirrel, right?
Eventually we come across none other than Shaw. Now we need to get to the top of a mountain. Here we're taught how to use rabbits against the hunters, which is genuinely horrifying. Jesus, that's the stuff of nightmares. By the way, I love that we're fighting against animal cruelty by inflicting animal cruelty ourselves.
Fight fire with fire, that's what I say!
Once we get to the top of the mountain, we encounter Shaw. Again. Luckily for us, the cliff breaks before it can take us out, and the next level sees us roll down a mountainside in a big snowball.
You're despicable.
Maneuvering over and through specific obstacles earns you points, though it's hard enough just getting to the end of the obstacle course. My performance here was kinda pitiful, but hey, at least we're alive, right?
Never mind.
Naturally, we land on another porcupine.
Not again.
This is becoming quite the literal pain in the butt.
And apparently porcupines are now our buddies. I guess that's all it takes.
A bear just sat on your face, you kinky freak.
It sounds to me like he's very open to bearing it all. Take that comment however you wish.
Now we need to cross a lake, and not only do we not yet know how to swim, the current is too strong even for a bear apparently. Fortunately, we meet a crazy French duck who's lost his troops.
Dude, I lost all my squadron and now my troops are scattered all over the forest, huh?
He wanted to find them, but they won't respond without the appropriate secret duck call, for which we need a Quack Simulator. Here we use Elliot to obtain a Quack Simulator from one of the hunters. With Elliot, we can taunt the hunters to lure them into their own traps. I'm sure one day these hunters will learn how guns work.
You realise they shoot long distances, right?
Once we can quack, we can swim to find the 3 groups of duck troops, repeating button patterns to quack the secret code to them. Once we return to the lake, it seems hunters are blocking our way, so Elliot needs to target approaching hunters using... what else? A porcupine and a bra, of course!
I told you those porcupines were kinky!
Finally, we reach the dam, but the beavers need one final piece to complete it.
Hey, that's Boswell's job, right?
Naturally, we have to seek out Boswell. Now and again, you'll come across enemies that are immune to certain attacks. For example, stinky hunters aren't affected by skunk attacks, while weekend warriors wear helmets, meaning throwing animals at their heads doesn't work. But you know what, considering there don't seem to be any animals around here to throw, it really doesn't make any difference, so it really makes one wonder why they bothered. Before long, we happen upon some disgruntled beavers.
Some thief stole my lunch!
Yeah, mine's gone too.
Well, then somebody's gotta go find our lunch!
You couldn't possibly go and look for it yourselves. Have no fear, the bear is here!
I'll do it! I always end up doing it.
As it turns out, the hunters have the beavers' lunch, return it to the beavers, and they become our buddies too. We eventually meet another beaver named O'Toole, who's broken his tooth. By this point, we can run on all fours, which is neat and all, but I swear the only time this is a necessity is for this task, as we chase down some runaway dentures.
I must have fallen asleep during this scene in the movie.
Look at them pearly whites. I can't thank you enough.
We then get a mission in which O'Toole agrees to take us to Boswell, the missing beaver. The objective simply being to protect him from the hunters. Yep, that's right. It's an escort mission. Betcha can't wait for that.
This beaver's not so eager.
We then find Boswell jumping on an outhouse.
Wait your turn!
As it turns out, the outhouse is the missing piece for the dam, and you need to pile the skunks on top of it to push it into the river.
Make yourself useful and throw some skunks up here.
Why is everyone in this game so unnecessarily rude?
And here we go!
It's not working.
Throwing the skunks proves somewhat ineffective, though.
Hey, Bear, you're fat. Why don't you come up here and help me out with this?
You're quite the charmer, aren't you?
We then have to ride the toilet down the rapids. Yes, you heard me. And there's a man inside. Well, this is a rude awakening, isn't it?
Yeah, this outhouse has one hell of a powerful flush. It's life-threatening.
Once this level is over, we fix the dam. Only to discover Elliot has been sending us the wrong direction altogether.
You asked moles how to get to Timberline?
What's more, the dam can't take Boog's weight and it bursts.
This kind of makes the last few levels completely pointless, but it doesn't bear thinking about. You thought I was out of bear puns, didn't you? Ha ha! I had you fooled!
We then wake up near Shaw's shack. I mean, at least I think we do. Wow, why do all these games have such bad lighting?
Do you see what I mean about how you can't see in dark levels? Last time, it was at least somewhat manageable because there were occasional lights to help you. Here, I have to put my game on max brightness just to see in front of me. Or Boog, for that matter. Like, could the developers not afford to make these two levels slightly brighter for this version of the game? This level is supposed to be creepy, and when I was younger, this level actually creeped me out. But now that I notice that I can't see what anything is, let alone what's supposed to be creepy, it loses its effect heavily.
What do we have here?
So anyway, Shaw knocks us out, and we then have to turn the TV on to lure Shaw down the stairs so we can sneak out. Although why Shaw didn't shoot us in the first place is a mystery to me. Like, you had me in the palm of your hand, you idiot. Anyway, outside we come across McSquizzy, who gives you the option of returning to the forest and saving the animals, or returning home to Timberline. Oh, screw this, I'm off. Bye everyone, good luck and have fun.
You came back! I knew you would!
Oh. It seems whichever way you pick, you wind up going back to the forest anyway, so I don't really see the point.
Oh, you'll make the right choice, whether you want to or not.
I actually bear a polar opinion. I really like this line because it makes Boog seem like a much worse person than he was in the movie, and I kinda like that actually. That's the one story change in a license-based game that I've ever liked. Also, the quote is just cool. Oh my god, my eyes! This is why I didn't want to turn my brightness up. If I don't turn it up, I'll have the eyesight of a mole for these two levels, but if I do, I'm blinded for the rest of the game. The contrast between light and dark is actually unforgivable in this game. I might have to go to the eye doctor after that, Jesus.
Now, this final part of the game goes on for a while. We need to cause a stink, so to speak, and rise up against the hunters. First, we need to take care of the hunters in a nearby area, and then we have to assist each group of animals individually.
Remember that yes or no stuff? Well, with how rarely the game does it, I wouldn't be surprised if you forgot about it. Get ready to do that a lot here, because the rest of the game basically didn't have this, and it needs to be shown off as a prominent feature for some reason. Again, the first person thing is supposed to be interactive, but the entire point of it falls flat when you realize that this could have easily been a button prompt instead. And since the game doesn't do it very often, you kinda have to remember that you can shake your head to answer those yes or no questions, because otherwise you can't proceed.
The forest is about to get very stinky.
The skunks need our help to stink out the hunters and throw them into their own traps, while McSquizzy needs your help to deter the hunters from cutting down his tree. Elliot opts to go himself, but McSquizzy's skeptical.
You're nothing but a scrawny little deer. How do you plan on scaring the hunters, eh?
I'm warning you, if you don't let me go, I will lick my butt.
I'm sorry, what?
I will lick my butt.
Yes, I thought that's what you said.
Ew. Ew. Yeah, me.
No, we mean you.
I hate to interrupt this game's faultless comic timing, but this next level sees us simply having to drive out the hunters. Not with a porcupine this time, but a can.
Such variety!
Meanwhile, the beavers need help cutting the trees down.
Which kind of sounds a little bit counterproductive to me, but alright.
It's Elliot's job to procure a chainsaw for the beavers, one of whom is clearly voiced by Maurice LaMarche.
Will you get a move on already? Windmills do not work that way! Good night!
This feels like a Futurama reunion, I'm loving it. The chainsaw is hard to control as it pulls you this way and that way, which is a good thing as it does a good job conveying what it's really like to be a deer carrying a chainsaw. I mean, I imagine so anyway. Amazingly, this is effective in scaring off the hunters, even though they have guns. One day they'll realise they have the upper hand. With the chainsaw, Riley the beaver can cut down trees that the hunters use as platforms. All you have to do is throw him towards them and he'll set to work.
Speaking of Riley, he kinda gets power crazy after wielding the chainsaw, and right now I'm glad I can shake my head up and down, because now I'm agreeing with him, not because I need the game to proceed, but because I'm scared he's going to end up killing us in the next 2 seconds if I decline.
Have you met my chainsaw?
Once that's done, you simply have to use Riley to sabotage the bridge supports to prevent more hunters from entering the forest.
One day your life will flash before your eyes.
Make sure it's all worth watching.
Can we talk about how honestly good that quote is? I'm over here having an existential crisis right now because of a power-crazy, chainsaw-wielding beaver from Open Season, the video game. At least this game has that from me.
Ah, but it's not over yet. The Beaver Lodge is also in danger.
Oh my.
Oh, for God's sake, not you again. I'm near the end of the game, and they're still giving me tutorials. You're worse than that creepy child in the Emperor's New Groove game.
Stay the hell away from me, you helpful freak.
The idea is simply to shoot beavers towards the hunters' boats to sink them, and towards the bridges to destroy them. The ducks also need help in eliminating the hunters and their trucks. Here, Elliot needs to nab us some propane tanks. Once you drop them, there's only a short amount of time before they explode, which we can use to our advantage to create a path. Once you've obtained 3 tanks and given them to the ducks, we have to cross the hunters' camp, dispose of the hunters as usual, and communicate with the ducks, which prompts them to drop the propane tanks to bomb the camp. Though, since we've already scared them off, bombing the camp seems a little redundant to me. Surely it would have been more impactful if the hunters had been around to see it happen.
Anyway, it seems we're done, right?
3 cheers for Boog, the mighty grizzly!
Can we finish the game now?
Ah, but let's not forget the final boss. It's Shaw.
Who knew?
This boss is, as expected, really boring. I mean, why stop now, right? First you need to throw a rabbit at him, and then a skunk. Finally, he goes to shoot you, but good old Elliot leaps out of hiding in the nick of time.
No!
Elliot? No!
No! Not the annoying talking sidekick. Anyone but him. Said nobody ever.
Finally, we just have to stun Shaw with a squirrel, and then roar at him. And... well, that's it. Honestly, what were we scared of? We could have just roared at him to begin with, and it would have saved us several hours of tedium.
You know, now that I think about it, this game has painted a huge image about humans with the hunting and the badge facts. And it's that humans are either stupid and incompetent, or malicious and slightly less incompetent. They're not exactly wrong about that.
We're then rewarded with some screenshots of the movie, because they were obviously too lazy to render one last cutscene. Seriously, if you skip this, you'd be under the impression that Elliot tragically dies to save his friend.
You know what? I think I prefer that ending.
We're then finally treated to some music, accompanied by some really long credits. Seriously, they seem never-ending. Just end the game already, I'm so bored! Anyway, as I briefly mentioned earlier, there are multiplayer minigames to unlock merely by progressing in the main game. They're pretty simplistic, but not bad. For example, one of the minigames sees you having to be the last character standing on a log, while another one requires you to throw the most rabbits into a burrow. There's so much animal abuse in this game.
You might notice that a good amount of them are based off of some events that happen throughout the story mode, like the porcupine shaking, getting flowers for Giselle, etc. They can be fun sometimes, but you kinda just play them once and then never touch any of them again. There are plenty more games that I'd rather play with friends than Open Season, even just counting license-based games alone. What sucks even more is that this is a selling point on the back of the game case. This is a pretty big bore to sit through. If I'm being honest, there's not a lot of good things this game does. It has good ideas. Said ideas were implemented pretty poorly, but good ideas. That's about it. This game feels like it's lost in time among many other license-based games, and that's probably a good thing considering what this game offers.
This game is just dull, and the lack of music really does not help. It doesn't play too badly, but it gets old fast. The gameplay is incredibly repetitive, and the dialogue is mind-numbing, despite the occasional half-decent joke. For the majority of the game, I was bored. There's no real challenge here, and the presence of this owl throughout makes the entire game feel like an extended tutorial. That said, throwing animals around is strangely entertaining.
Gotta work on my landing.
But despite the fun but morally questionable animal abuse, Open Season is a snooze fest. While this game does indeed have some positive traits, it's safe to say it's nonetheless bucking awful.
You thought I was going to end on a bear pun, didn't you? Ha ha!
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And a very special thanks to TheFrozenCavern for joining me for this review. It was my first ever collaboration, so go easy on me. This guy does a series called Garbage from Your Childhood, most of which are old movie-based games, similar to what I do. So if you like that kind of thing, which you probably do, go check it out. I'll be back sometime next month, I think, with another video. Bye-bye for now.
Duck season, fire!